Welcome to our deep dive into Dublin's courts. This week, we're going inside the criminal courts of justice, where the cases we're seeing tell a story of a city wrestling with some really deep social fractures. Let's get right into it.
So we kick things off with a case that is just truly shocking. We have a healthcare assistant, a woman named Rachel Lawrence, who gets behind the wheel under the influence of both drink and drugs. She then overtakes 6 cars and plows straight into a mother and daughter who are on a pedestrian crossing.
And look, the judge in this case did not mince words. He called it, and I quote, "as bad as you can get." The severity here is just undeniable. And, it really sets the stage for what turns out to be a very, very complex outcome.
But her case wasn't the only one this week that pointed to much deeper issues. We also saw the case of Anthony Hart. Now he, in the middle of a psychotic episode, completely smashed a television. His case brings this raw, shirtless rage into the courtroom, but one that stems from a mental breakdown, not from simple malice.
And then you have the long arm of the law reaching way back in time. Benjamin O'Neill is facing charges for organized crime and money laundering from 2017. It just goes to show you the state's relentless pursuit of those financial networks that prop up all the gangland activity. So right there you have 3 wildly different cases, but as you're about to see, they are all deeply connected.
So let's start with the most dramatic one, Rachel Lawrence. We know the crime was absolutely horrific, but what was the real cost, and what was the actual consequence?
Well, the human cost was just immense. One of the victims who was hit on that crossing was left with 4 fractured vertebrae. That is a life-altering injury, all caused in a single reckless moment. This isn't just some statistic, it's a person's life that's been completely shattered.
So, for a crime that the judge himself called as bad as you can get, a crime that caused a life-altering injury, the sentence was entirely suspended. Yeah, no jail time. And that just raises a huge question, right? What is going on here?
Well, the context behind this decision is absolutely key. The court heard that Lawrence, who is a healthcare assistant, was actually suffering from auditory hallucinations after she fled a very abusive relationship. So the judge, he had to weigh this terrible crime against a profound personal crisis.
And this tension, this tug of war between a person's circumstance and their crime, it becomes even clearer when we compare 2 other cases that came through the courts. We're talking 2 people charged with very similar offenses who walked away with wildly different fates.
Okay, just look at this comparison. On one side, you've got Noreen Smith. She's homeless, intoxicated, and for public intoxication, she gets 2 months in prison. Then, on the other side, you have Edward Twomley. He's an employed construction worker, commits a similar public order offense, and he's allowed to just make a charity donation to avoid a conviction.
And when the judge was sentencing Noreen Smith, his words were just chillingly final. He said her time was up. Think about that. A definitive end to her freedom delivered just like that. But why? Why was her time up when someone else's clearly wasn't?
It's because Noreen Smith's story is a tragedy that goes way beyond that courtroom. You see, she once had a significant inheritance. But, as the court heard, she drank all her money. Her fall, her story, it represents the collision of the city's housing and addiction crises. She wasn't just another defendant. She was a symbol of a massive societal failure.
So when you see outcomes that are this different for crimes that are this similar, it really forces you to ask the question, what is truly being judged here? Is it the act itself, or is it the social standing of the person standing in the dock?
And that question leads us right to the bigger picture. Because these individual cases, they are not just isolated incidents. They are symptoms of much wider cracks that are appearing in the social safety net, the very thing that's supposed to underpin our justice system.
When you actually connect the dots between these cases, 3 common denominators just jump out. First, a pervasive mental health crisis, which we saw with Rachel Lawrence and Anthony Hart. Second, an addiction and housing abyss, really personified by Noreen Smith. And third, a stark judicial divide between the so-called fallen and the fortunate. So what this all suggests is that our courts are increasingly being forced to operate as a kind of makeshift triage unit. Think about it. They aren't just dealing with crime anymore. They're dealing with the downstream consequences of substance misuse, psychiatric failures, and homelessness. These are all problems that should have been dealt with long before anyone ever set foot in a courtroom.
So, after all is said and done, what is the final echo of the gavel from this week in Dublin's courts?
What's the ultimate takeaway from these stories of mercy, of punishment, and of this incredible systemic strain?
I think it's this. The rule of law itself, it's still firm, but it's operating on increasingly unstable ground. The cases we've looked at today, they reveal that the societal cracks right underneath the courthouse floor, in mental health care, in housing, in addiction support, those cracks are getting wider and wider.
And that leaves us with a really critical question. When we see suspended sentences for truly violent acts, we have to ask, is this justice serving as a deterrent, or is it just a slap on the wrist? And maybe more importantly, what does the answer to that question mean for the safety of every single person walking on Dublin's streets?